Now let's talk with Otis Moss III. Otis, welcome.
Thank you. It's good to be back here.
Always good to see you. Your message today seems like an invitation to me to make loss a new opportunity, a new beginning. So I wonder if we begin there and just move forward on the stories you've already told.
Absolutely. Well, I think that any time that we lose someone or something, whatever it may be, doesn't have to be a physical loss. It is an invitation to how will you respond. And I think the story of Patty and Susan, here they are. They lose their husbands, but yet they respond with compassion and with love. Someone else claims to have lost something. He says, I want to respond by burning. The one who is the minister responds not as a minister. The two lay people respond as ministers. I find it very fascinating. These two very different people, one gets media attention and the others do not. That they're helping an entire country rebuild, and another is trying to tear down.
I want to go there because I want to, for people watching right now, we each have a personal loss. You don't live without them. So we can sit in front of this television now and we can look back and say, well, this loss I handled well, this loss I didn't. But at another level, the national level, let's go to 9/11. People say we haven't been the same country since. I agree. My question to you, Otis, is in the midst of a congregation, in the midst of a great city like Chicago, what have we substituted as a country, as people? What choices are we making now as a people about what will substitute, what God is substituting for the loss that we felt? What loss did we feel? A little bit of pride, maybe. The United States lost a sense of invulnerability.
Absolutely.
We lost a sense that we really are on top, really on top. I mean, we got decimated by 2 commercial airlines and 14 radical kids. What are we called to substitute now, Otis? Where is the substitution coming from, or are we blocking it?
I think that on 2 fronts. One, we are blocking it. On the second front there's that the mythic notion that we were invulnerable, there's invincibility, was crushed at that moment. The second thing that I heard someone in Europe make the statement is that America was welcomed into the world in a strange way. That you now experience the pain, that whether it is in England, whether it's in Israel, whether it's in Palestine, that we all deal with on a consistent basis. So we were invited into the pain of the world as a result of 9/11.
I was standing with 2 Irish girls 6 months after this happened, and they got to trust me a little, and finally they said, you know what got us after 9/11? All of a sudden, Americans began to say, the world will never be the same. The world has changed. What's wrong with you people? You're just in the situation that we're all in now.
Absolutely.
And that's what you're saying. We have to understand, we have to join the human race.
Absolutely. That we woke up from our dream at that moment. The dream of westward expansion, the dream that we're invulnerable, except with Pearl Harbor, but the idea that we are now a part of a world that is tragic and violent and painful.
Is this failure? Have we failed? Is America gone?
America's not gone. America is constantly being reformed. America, I like the way that W.E.B. Du Bois says it. He says, we are the yet-to-be United States of America. And we are still the yet-to-be United States of America. And we are constantly reforming ourselves. But if we choose to live in the dream time, we will never become the people we are called to become.
That's right.
And I'd like to ask both of you about the current goings on in the news. You alluded to it in the Quran burning issue. How do you process that with a congregation of 8,000 people? How do you bring that to the pulpit and motivate people to look at it and to reflect on how they're relating to people of other faiths and whether or not we're doing the work and being open like we need to be to have a deeper understanding of this?
I think that's a good question. I think that taking the gospel and the person of Jesus very seriously and looking at this idea of burning a Quran, of burning someone else's sacred book, and saying we're doing this in protest and we're doing, is this a Christ-centered response? And I would say no. That's not a Christ-centered response to burn. It is a response to say that we are called to love. And love that is rooted in justice, and love that is rooted in peace, and love that demands that we break down barriers. And it's fascinating to me that we have given someone with allegedly 50 members the world stage, and yet Susan and Patty have not received the world stage, and they're rebuilding lives. We would rather lift up the burning instead of lifting up the building.
Well, it's a fascinating statement, too. I was speaking with Jim Wallace a few weeks ago, and he made the point that he thinks people are hungry for an alternative narrative. What we haven't done well is hold that up to the media and make it attractive to the media. So, Sister Joan, why don't you take that?
Well, we're allowing the media to create stories, and they're creating negatively. Now, nobody loves the media more than I do, but I'm telling you, they're at a crossover point right now.
Right. It feels that way, that we're in a juxtaposition of opportunities, so to speak.
And juxtaposition of political partisanship over investigative or rational journalism. I know that in our own case, you said, how do you do it? In my monastery, in a different category, we're a small town, and but we've had a lot of murder. And our sisters have begun to go first to the families of the murdered and ask them if they, tell them that we're going to do a blessing of the site where the body was found, and to invite the family, if they're emotionally ready, to do that kind of thing, so that we can say this is a sacred place where an evil act occurred, and we reconsecrate this to all of our souls. Erie is not a place of evil. Erie is a sacred place we want to make more sacred. And then we've begun to bring all the families of the murdered together every year so that they can see that the city loves them, embraces them, that their part of town is not the forgotten part of town, that that part of town is not the more abused part of town. In other words, how do you raise it? You say, we refuse to allow this to overshadow this. We find the Patty and the Susan who are doing the other thing. We create models so that people who do want it, they do want another narrative, but they're sitting in a condo someplace in Chicago and Erie, and they say, there's nothing I can do. Therefore, the churches must create viable sacred acts that confront the unsacred. We should have gone into every park in the country with our Muslim friends and carrying the Quran and allow this to be seen as a sacred moment.
Love. And the powerful thing is that when you have in your congregation the victim and the victimizer, the violated and the one who does the violate, then you have a completely different type of engagement. That now I have the person who shot the young man and the family of the young man who was shot. And then now you have to do a different juxtaposition, understanding that, guess what, we have all of us, in every congregation, every community, we have the victim and the violator in us. And how do we engage the fact that we are not always the victim? That sometimes we are related to the violator. And as Americans, we need to recognize victim and violator, that we are both and not one or the other.
And we're only learning that now.
That's right.
We're only beginning to understand that the same things that happened in German armies have happened in ours.
Absolutely.
And that we are, only we can change it. And we have to demand that change.
Right.
Well, to that point, Sister Joan, it occurs to me I have two wonderful perspectives to ask each of you here. As pastor of an 8,000 member congregation, you probably lead many people to the desire to be pastors in your faith tradition. You live in a monastic community, and we've talked about this a little bit before. For each of you, what is the future of the church in this country, of people wanting to serve the church? Otis, I'll let you go first in terms of...
I think it's very bright to use, I hate to use it this way, but a very kind of marketing kind of phrase, but the church's development is in boutique and not necessarily Walmart-ish. People that are very specific in developing communities and building relationships in neighborhoods. So you have this emerging movement of especially young people in their 20s who are committed to poverty, who are committed to changing that, who are committed to eradicating illiteracy, who are committed to the environment, committed to eradicating racism. They recognize that in many ways they feel that the church's role is transformative, public and private. That all religion has a personal dimension, but it must have public implications for transformation. And that's what I think is very exciting. And so these smaller pockets of people making the decision to say that we're going to live very much influenced by monastic orders in many ways, to live together and to make transformative change that way. And Shane Claiborne, for example, in Philadelphia is an example of that. In the community in Philadelphia, they made a commitment to the homeless and poverty. So it's happening all across the nation, and it's very exciting to see this.
And you have said that it's not the number necessarily,
right.
it's the quality, right?
The brother and I didn't practice this before I came. We're coming from exactly the same place.
All right.
You see all these headlines about numbers of religious down. I'm here to tell you that awareness of monastic life and monasteries has never been so high in my life, and I am recalled to that part of the scripture that says, we are leaven. Why are we trying to be capitalist corporations? When you say, how many nuns do you have? That's a capitalist question to a Christian, answer to a Christian question. It doesn't make any difference. The difference is made by those who come desiring to be that leaven that raises up the whole church, not just ourselves. That is that sign, that place, that model, that standard, that call, that leaven. It's all it's going to take.
That's right.
Consciousness and our courage to do what those scriptures demand and to help our congregations find that themselves.
Absolutely.
And you concur on that as well?
Oh, absolutely. Yes, indeed. What's so very exciting is to see a new generation of people who really want to take the scripture to heart. That how do I live this out? How do I live out to be a peacemaker?
Yes.
And the fact is, I'm loving the fact that people are actually checking out the Gospels for once. Instead of kind of running around everywhere. It's like, yes, the Gospels are in here. There's some powerful stuff in here about loving your enemies. There's some powerful stuff in here about what you do to the prisoner, what you do to the poor, what you do to those who are naked. You do also to me. There's some powerful things about how do we treat children. And the only two groups of people that Jesus has issue with. Those people who mistreat children and people who are religious hypocrites. And I think that is a challenge for us as a nation. What do we do with our children? Yeah. And we operate as religious hypocrites most of the time.
Otis, thank you for being with us today. Thank you both for being prophetic voices for us in this country today.